Kevin Smith staying in Oxford, that's a sneaky important detail for Pete Golding. We'll explain.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one sports podcast network in America. Thank you for that. On today's show, we're talking about celebrating the Ole Miss memories that shaped you as a fan. I will talk about what I'm thinking of right now with the playoffs about a week away. I'll share a few moments that stand out from my own 40-plus years following the Rebels, and we'll appreciate exactly what it means to reach this point in the program's journey. Next, we'll break down Pete Golding's contract and the assistant coaching deals that Michael Katz got yesterday and tweeted on there, and what details stand out the most for the future of the program here. But first, we're going to start with Kevin Smith being included on those MOUs, Katz uncovered, and why his presence could be massively important for Ole Miss in 2026 and beyond. All of this and more on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available in all the podcast apps and on YouTube, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. All right, so one of the big questions around the fan base right now is Kevin Smith and Kiwan Lacy and all of that stuff. Yes, I saw the tweet that went out earlier. I'm not really going to deal with that at the moment. We're going to talk a little bit about the memorandums of understanding and all of that went out that Ole Miss released to Michael Katz, and he tweeted about that. And he named all of the coaches that he received. And anybody that is locked into LSU, Michael Katz did not get. So anybody that is still out there, that is still going, it doesn't mean they're going to stay at Ole Miss, but it also doesn't mean they're going to go to LSU either as well. So when you look at the names that are on this list of what went on, Michael Katz received Ole Miss head coach Pete Golding's term sheet. Also got term sheets on John David Baker, which is only like 48 hours old, Jake Schoonover, Brian Brown, Kevin Smith, Matt Kitchens, Jay Shoup, John Garrison, Randall Joyner, Joe Judge, and Wes Neighbors. Now, it's real interesting to say that Kevin Smith, Randall Joyner, and Joe Judge, even though Joe Judge and Joyner, it's assumed that they're going to be at Ole Miss next year, there was not an amended term sheet that was turned in on those three names. So it is worth noting that it's not the same as John Garrison. It's not the same as some of these new signings that we have heard about over the last couple of days. And because of that, people are going to freak out and wonder what's going on with Kevin Smith. Now, it's interesting because LSU released their board-directed term sheets that got approved, and Kevin Smith wasn't on that either. And it's important to realize on these term sheets, because we had these conversations over the last couple of days, like, oh, you could not sign Charlie Weiss because of the term sheet said you had to pay a buyout of 300% of his stated contract, so you couldn't do that. And then they upped him by $500,000 per year. So the reality is Charlie Weiss Jr. didn't stay at LSU because of his term sheet that he originally signed. It's because they paid him to do so. They overpaid. He's going to be the highest offensive coordinator in the Southeastern Conference. These term sheets are incredibly breakable right now. So that is worth keeping an eye on. No contract, to my knowledge, has been signed. It will be signed, but it hasn't been signed yet. So Kevin Smith having the memorandum of understanding at Ole Miss does not mean he's going to end up at Ole Miss, but he's not on LSU's list right now either, so it's no guarantee that he's going there as well. Now, the reason this is important and the reason Pete Golding needs to hang on to this is probably Kiwan Lacy, who was a Doak Walker Award finalist this season for the Ole Miss Rebels. That's the top 3 running backs in the entire country. And They are pre-portaling the crap out of him. You can guarantee that, trying to get him any way they can down to Baton Rouge and to other schools. LSU's not the only place that's pre-portaling this guy. This guy can go to any school he wants to go to and just would walk in the door and be fine. But Kevin Smith would be a relationship for Kiwan Lacy and Shakai Mills-Knight and Demarius Yates, these running backs that have been stacked on top of stacked on top of stacked. They would be worth paying attention to where Ole Miss can go, especially at the running back position. So you need Kevin Smith. Everybody assumed when all of this started, when Lane started throwing his temper tantrums and all of that Kevin Smith was going to go to LSU, and he still might do that. But we have gotten to this point to where Joe Cox and Billy Glasscock and George McDonald, all of those guys are down in Baton Rouge. They're not around to where Ole Miss even had a term sheet to release on them. So Ole Miss, I think, has a legitimate chance to get Kevin Smith to handle what's going on. And remember, everybody's thinking about the Kevin Smith that came to Ole Miss from Florida Atlantic with Lane Kiffin. Nobody's talking about the Kevin Smith that went to Miami in between, that kind of broke away from Lane as well. So there is an independence with Kevin Smith that you think it could work. Now, the phone call, on Twitter, whatever, there's a chance it's just two 15-year-olds just talking out the rear end. There's a chance it means nothing. So the fan base needs to not freak out and pay attention to 15-year-olds when it comes to tampering. That's simply the way that works. Pay attention to exactly what you need to pay attention to and not all the noise that are outside of what's going on. There's a playoff game coming up. Kiwan Lacy, he's going to be on the field. Number 5 will be there taking carries from Trinidad Chambliss to go against the Green Wave. And Ole Miss has a chance to make a real run. They have a tough draw, potentially, but they have a chance to make a real run. Ole Miss should beat Tulane. It should. It's going to be an absolutely beautiful uniform game, but Ole Miss should win that game. Should be a record-sized crowd. There should be 200,000 people in Oxford, Mississippi that day. Should be absolutely fantastic. Then you have the Georgia Bulldogs if you get past the Tulane Green Wave. And you should be all right against the Georgia Bulldogs. One bad quarter, really one bad play, one tackle on a 4th and 2, and you likely win that game. And you're 12-0 and number 2 in the entire country right now. Then, if you get past Georgia, you have Ohio State. And that'd be a fun game as far as a matchup goes against a blue blood. That would be a really fun game. And then it goes to the other side of the bracket and all of that. But 4 games over the course of about a month from every single dream of your Ole Miss fandom coming true. And I don't think that needs to be wasted worrying about transfers and coaches and all of this other drama stuff that's just simply not important right now. It's not even a little bit. But some people like the drama. Some people need the drama. They want to report on everything going on around town. I mean, that's just not important. What's important is in 8 days, Ole Miss is going to play the biggest sporting event in the history of the state of Mississippi against the Tulane Green Wave. And that's the prize that we need to keep our eyes on at the moment. You have Matt McLaughlin, you have Walker Jones, you have John David Baker, all of those guys working on retention. Let them work. The longer of a run that Ole Miss makes, the longer they have to have retention on these players. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Anyway, when we come back, we will talk about the salary figures for Pete Golding's Ole Miss staff, and Pete Golding will tell you what stood out to us. We talk about all of that coming up next. Let's talk about something most men don't bring up, but absolutely should. Stress from work, money, life. It doesn't just switch off at night. And when it shows up, it can show up at the worst possible time. Rougiette Ready is designed to help you take back control. Rougiette Ready is a next generation prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. Rougiette Ready combines 3 clinically proven ingredients in one mint that dissolves under your tongue so it absorbs fast. The science behind Rougiette Ready stands out. 3 clinically proven ingredients in one formula designed for both mental and physical readiness. You connect with a board-certified doctor online and everything ships discreetly to your door. It's easy to understand why over 150 men have already made the switch. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now is the time. Head to rougiette.com/locked-on. That's RUGIET.com/locked-on to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rougiette Ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets on the action as it unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, the momentum flips after a turnover or after a 4th down stop. Yeah, seriously. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Player props update as guys heat up, and you can bet the next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on this video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcast you're listening to and give it a 5-star review. It costs absolutely nothing, but it keeps this stuff free. And thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it up to the next level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Ole Miss with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 per year. Go to lockedonolemiss.supercast.com or check out the link down in the show notes below to learn more. All right, so Pete Golding signed his term sheet. Michael Katz, the part of the information that he got was that Michael Katz pointed out that Pete Golding signed a term sheet with Ole Miss, and with that, some assistants signed as well. John David Baker will make about $1 million per year, and Brian Brown will make $1.2 million per year. And also in Brian Brown's contract, he's listed as a title of head coach of the defense. So he is going to be the lead defensive coordinator under Pete Golding, but Brian Brown making $1.2 million. Says he was sent the most recent contracts for all of the current assistants. All of them were recently updated except Joyner's, Judge's, and Smith's. Now, we all assume that Joyner and Judge is going to land in Oxford and be in Oxford. So take that for what it's worth as well. But we'll see how it goes there, honestly, if we're going to be real about it. Now, if you look at the other stuff that's going on, Pete's contract, interesting. It is $6.8 million a year, effective December 31st, 2026. And year 2, he goes up $100,000 per year. So after 5 years, he'll go to $7.2 million. And it kind of fits. He didn't deserve a contract like what Lane got or was going to get from Ole Miss. And this frees up money for the other parts that are going on inside the program. Important things, NIL, rev share, all of that stuff. That's money that goes back into the coffers. That's $5-6 million worth of money. That's not nothing. But Pete Golding's contract's about what I expected. I kind of like what he's doing with the assistant coaches. The whole defensive staff is likely to be retained. So we'll see how that looks. And offensively, you have Joe Judge, you have John Garrison guaranteed. You have Kevin Smith, who has signed a term sheet, at least on one location. And we don't know how that's going to end up. So that's 3 out of the 5 coaches on the offensive side of the ball that they would keep in that situation as well. The only 2 that they would be lacking would be tight ends coach and wide receivers coach. Now, that's not counting like inside wide receivers and all that. Now, we talked about it the other night at practice when it opened up on Monday or Tuesday. Mike Stoops was in the building, not Mark, not Bob, but Mike. That's a former head coach at Arizona. He was Mark Stoops' defensive linebackers coach at Kentucky. He worked with Pete Golding as an analyst at Alabama. So he does have familiarity with the system. That's something to probably pay attention to as this moves forward. That's just a name to know. And we also heard the name Michael Spurlock as somebody you should look after as well. I don't know if it's for outside wide receivers or inside wide receivers or an analyst role or what is going on. It's just a name that I have heard. People that were on campus during all of this going on, there was Jerry Neuheisel that was on campus for a little bit as well. That's a name to at least pay attention to. But there's a rumor that maybe Rick Neuheisel and Jerry Neuheisel are going up to Washington State. I'm not sure there. But that is something to pay attention to with what's going on. I genuinely like the way that Pete Golding has not necessarily been hyper focused on just 2025. He's been working pretty consistently on 2026 as well, almost having to split timelines of what's going on. And Pete has played a little bit of 4D chess during all of this. Now, I'll be honest about it. What he did with Charlie Weiss was kind of next level, honestly, because if you heard all the noise coming out of Baton Rouge, he had an unbreakable term sheet or something like that. And you heard about on the Ole Miss side, well, Charlie, if he comes back to Oxford and gets in the room, I don't know if he's going to leave again. And all of that ended up with LSU spending an extra $1.5 million of their money. Now, they have money. I'm assuming not an unlimited amount, but they have money. But Pete Golding basically getting them to spend an extra $1.5 million, that's worth paying attention to. Is that the same thing that's going to happen with Kevin Smith? If something like that happens, if he goes to Baton Rouge, is it just getting Kevin Smith more money and forcing them to spend more money? That I'm not sure about. But it's something worth monitoring. It's something worth paying attention to, because at the end of the day, you have a finite number of resources, and how you use them is going to determine absolutely everything. And if you get people to overpay for players and coaches and basically treat Baton Rouge and LSU like Texas Tech, now Texas Tech's good, but they're having to pay about 25% over everybody else because of the Lubbock tax. If you can get that in Baton Rouge, that's a win for everybody in the Southeastern Conference. They're going to have a good team, but is it sustainable because of the amount of money that you're forcing to be spent? So we'll see what that looks like. I like what's going on. I like the first couple of weeks of the Pete Golding realm. I like what it looks like, how he's working. I love the John David Baker hire. That absolutely is a fantastic hire. It's amazing. I love Brian Brown coming up to the head coach of the defense, essentially. I like where this has been going. Now, it could slow down a little bit while they're preparing for the college football playoff or something like that. But I expect sometime before the portal, everybody to have clarity of what's going to go on. Now, the linebackers coach, it's not a rush to do that because Pete Golding coaches linebackers. That's what he does. He was the linebackers coach. Chris Kiffin was the assistant linebackers coach. So that position is covered. The defense is completely covered. And with the LSU people coming back to handle the offensive side of the ball, that leaves John David Baker to bring his people in, and all they're working on is retention and the transfer portal and the chance to maximize exactly what's going on. I think they're doing a pretty fantastic job, a pretty bang-up job, if we're going to be honest. And honestly, that's what we need it to see. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Anyway, in our final segment, I get that people want to jump ahead to 2026 right now because of muscle memory or whatever, because that's what we normally do. We're always worried about what's going to happen next. But let's slow down for a minute on this last Friday before we enter game week of playoff week at Ole Miss and just kind of look at the 2025 season and before, how my fandom personally has evolved over the last 40 years. All of that's next. You know, the holidays are officially here, which means gift hunting season is on. And if you want something meaningful, personal, and guaranteed to get a reaction, Aura Frames is the gift that delivers every single time. It's not just something you wrap, it is a way to share memories because Aura isn't your average picture frame. You can preload the frame with photos before you gift it. So when they plug it in, the memories are already there. No apps to figure out, no setup headaches, just instant smiles. Grandparents, parents, and newlyweds, anyone who loves photos, endless uploads of pictures and 30-second videos through the Aura app, they're going to love this. It's a holiday gift that actually gets used and not forgotten in a drawer. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver Mat frames, named the #1 frame by Wirecutter. Get that by using promo code college at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code college. The deal is exclusive to listeners and frames sell out fast. So order yours now to get it just in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning it at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. You know, with the playoffs about 8 days away, the game with the Tulane Green Wave in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium, I saw the video yesterday that Ole Miss did. It was narrated by DK. It was absolutely fantastic. If you have not seen it, I recommend everybody watch it. It's only like 2 hours, 2 minutes and 58 seconds or something like that long. Well worth your time. It was fantastic. And it is basically what we have been talking about on this podcast for the last month. And while this month should have been a celebration of sorts for Ole Miss Rebel fans, a culmination of sorts for Ole Miss Rebel fans, and a coronation of sorts for Rebel fans. Listen, this is a fan base that since 1963 has just had moments of brilliance. A whole bunch of, we almost got there, and if one more thing just went our way, this is the season that was the reward for all of that. My father lives in Newton, Mississippi. He was born in 1950, which means he got to spend age 8 to age 13 of his life, his formative sports years, watching Ole Miss win SEC championships and all those great games. And I'm jealous, legitimately jealous, because when I was born, they were 6 years past throwing everything away. The next year, when I was a little over 1 year old, Ole Miss beat Notre Dame in a fantastic game where you thought maybe they were getting there. It's happening again. We figured out how to grow this. That was under Ken Cooper. And then Ken Cooper left Ole Miss, and Ole Miss hired Steve Sloan. And Steve Sloan came from Texas Tech and was a good program and all that. Both the offensive and defensive coordinator did not come with Steve Sloan. And we saw the results of what's happened. John Forcade was the quarterback during that period at Ole Miss, and he'll tell you exactly what happened. But the way it sits, Ole Miss still didn't get over the hump. Steve Sloan's last game was my first game to attend in person. That was the Egg Bowl in 1982, and lost by Ole Miss to Mississippi State in Veterans Memorial Stadium in Jackson. And still, whenever that happened, Ole Miss got beat pretty good, but it was a really cool thing. And he's like, hey, Ole Miss is almost there. They're turning the corner in my mind, because at that point I was like 6 years old. So yeah, they're going to be awesome. They're going to win championships any day now. And we all know that now that wasn't the case. But for a 6-year-old, it felt like every single year was going to be your year, more so than just fanatic like. Billy Brewer got hired, and I was kind of raised on Kelly Powell. That was my real introduction into Ole Miss football. Against LSU, where Timmy Moffitt ran a punt back for a touchdown. Jeff Wickersham was LSU's quarterback on that day. Against Mississippi State, that was the immaculate deflection game when Ole Miss came back in the second half and won that game. The Egg Bowl became an annual tradition between me and my father for memories that you just want to have together every single year we went to that football game. And it was awesome. The Emory's a memory game in 1985. Ole Miss winning the game in 86. Billy Brewer dominating that Egg Bowl series. The game happening in Veterans Memorial Stadium in Jackson. Then Ole Miss would get to the point where they're just about to break through and just about to do it, and they'd go on probation. So after 86, they go on probation. After 92, they go on probation. They just incrementally getting a little bit better. Then Tommy Tuberville gets hired. And we all know the story with Tuberville, but I remember things in 92, by the way, the stand, which I don't know how it didn't get into the video, but Tuberville going for 2 against Mississippi State. You saw that on there. The not the Music City Bowl, the Motor City Bowl up in Detroit against Randy Moss, that Ole Miss actually won that game and started a bowl trip with him and David Cutcliffe that lasted several years. There was one year that Alabama got in at 6-5 despite losing to Ole Miss, who was 7-4 at an Independence Bowl, and we were shocked about that. Then Ole Miss took on Oklahoma, won that game. They beat Nebraska. And all of a sudden, Ole Miss started winning games against these, quote, blue blood teams. And through the Orgeron years, you're struggling, and that's when I was at Ole Miss, and you kind of got to see how the sausage is made. And then it went on to the Houston Nut time, and Ole Miss won a couple of games. And in 2008, they were a really good football team. That defense was really salty. 2009, they were a really good team, but they just didn't quite feel right. And then 2010, 2011, they fell off again. Ole Miss hires Hugh Freeze, Reverend Hugh, to come in to get Ole Miss out of the wilderness. And by goodness, he does a heck of a job. He had the perfect offense under the rules of the time. Ole Miss beat Alabama in 14. I was there. The goalpost got taken down, all of that stuff. Then they went to Tuscaloosa and won the game again. But as in many times during this fandom, there was a dip right after that. 2016 was disappointing. 2016 also, after that, Hugh Freeze got fired with cause. Matt Luke got elevated with the DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown wide receivers, and everybody was poaching Ole Miss's roster whenever this changeover happened. And I remember uniform-wise was pretty brilliant during that period, but the football was not particularly good, especially defensively. And then in 2019, Elijah Moore scored a touchdown that should have been a tying touchdown, did a fake dog pee, and you ended up with the hiring of Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin has led Ole Miss to 4 10-win seasons in 5 years, and the 5th year they would have had it as well if they wouldn't have completely choked, but it is what it is. That got Ole Miss elevated to this height. He left to go to LSU because he didn't think he could do it at Ole Miss. He didn't realize he was about to do it at Ole Miss. And he didn't like that he was getting the blame for having the second best roster in all of college football and going 9-3 with it and missing the playoffs. So, of course, leave Ole Miss this year. Ole Miss is rebuilding. There's no chance they're going to the playoffs. You thought another dip was coming this season, and it didn't happen. Ole Miss is 11-1, 6th in the country, hosting the Tulane Green Wave next Saturday. And It's the coronation that Ole Miss fans deserve, honestly. Win the football game, of course. Enjoy that party, though. Enjoy everything that's going on because of that timeline that I just spit out. There's thousands of other people that have that same exact timeline, either longer or shorter, depending on how old they are, about how much this football game means to them. And I'm excited to see exactly how that goes for Ole Miss in the playoffs. I'm ready to see. Hey, we'll be at the Tampa Bay Rebel Club watch party at a Beef O'Brady's in Tampa, Florida. We're going to do a live pregame show. We're going to do a live postgame show. It should be pretty awesome. But if you're tuning in, that is something you want to look at as well. I do want to say, thanks for tuning in today on Locked On Ole Miss. You know, we're going to talk to Tim Thomas. We're going to have Michael Katz a little bit later on. Make sure you subscribe and follow so you get all of the latest episodes. We're on all of the social channels, so check those out as well. And also, did Locked On Ole Miss make your Spotify Wrapped? Prove it on social media to secure a free month of our brand new Everydayer Club. Just tag our national Locked On Podcast Network account on any social platform, and they'll drop you a code. Be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club and get your favorite show ad-free, exclusive access to the members-only Discord server. And for those of you on video, we're going to send you to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure your second listen is Locked On College Football. Hotty toddy, everybody. Remember, the biggest college football game in Mississippi history is about a week away. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. Hotty toddy.